The railroad starts Fallout 4 in the worst position its organisation has seen in years. Its HQ had been destroyed along with most safe houses, and several of its best fighters, called Heavies, were missing. Despite this crippling loss of personnel and facilities, the railroad rebuilds its organisation back to strength, but implements no changes or safeguards to prevent such a destructive raid from happening again. This isn't the first time either that the railroad has suffered a raid like this and failed to adapt. Wanting to free third-generation synths makes the railroad a good faction, but its structural issues combined with its questionable tactical choices means that they often get a lot of criticism from Fallout fans. This leads me to the opinion that the railroad doesn't work, and I'd like to try reimagining the organisation to fix these issues and make it a more effective faction in the main story of Fallout 4. This video will be split into these chapters: why the railroad doesn't work, rules, inspirations for changes made, reimagining, and main quest. In my opinion, the railroad doesn't work for three reasons: over-centralization, poor tactical doctrine, and lack of popular appeal. Over-centralization can be broken down into two separate issues: the over-centralization of leadership and of operations. The railroad is led by Desdemona, with Dr. Carrington as her second in command. Having both in one location is a waste of Carrington's leadership ability, as Desdemona takes charge of the Old North Church and its operations, leaving second in command as little more than a meaningless title. She sidesteps him on several occasions, which naturally would be frustrating. The over-centralization of operations refers to the fact that time after time, the railroad conducts all its major functions in its HQ. These include intelligence analysis, training, weapons manufacturing, and operational planning. This means that when the HQs are discovered and attacked by the Institute, the entire organisation is paralysed and, in some cases, takes significant time to recover to its previous strength, such as in 2266 under the railroad's founder Agamemnon, or in 2288 with the raid on the switchboard. Poor tactical doctrine covers the railroad's frankly baffling decision-making process in its attempt to deal with the Institute threat. These include how they recruit, their lack of widespread facilities like safe houses, choices made during the Battle of Bunker Hill, a compromised dead drop system, and logistics. The railroad's recruitment method is completely ridiculous. They tell people how to find their HQ, then brush them off and make them a temporary helper called a tourist, who is kept at an arm's length. The tourist system is not a bad idea, as it gives the railroad access to people who can help them with small or low-risk jobs. What isn't good is giving these tourists sensitive information, such as the password to access their base. Any organisation that needs to keep its location and operations secret should not be inviting strangers through the front door without serious vetting first. The railroad has a serious lack of facilities and does almost nothing to fix this issue. They establish Mercer Safe House, but this does little to scale their abilities and only serves two real functions: for the player to get a Radiant quest, and build the teleporter for the main story. The only meaningful facilities that the railroad has are the Old North Church, Bunker Hill, and Ticonderoga Safe House. However, even these locations are not used effectively. Old Man Stockton tells us the following about Bunker Hill.
All you need to know is this is the first stop for all our new packages.
This means that this location is a bottleneck for railroad operations, and the entire organisation could become crippled if it was compromised. This becomes a major issue during the quest Battle of Bunker Hill, and forces the railroad to stand and fight two other factions which have superior numbers and firepower. Later in the story, the Institute destroys Ticonderoga and the Brotherhood of Steel destroys the Old North Church, forcing the railroad to evacuate to Mercer Safe House, which likely lacks the equipment they need to effectively run the organisation. If they had set up more safe houses in the aftermath of the switchboard raid, this would have mitigated the damage that the Institute and Brotherhood of Steel could do, as they'd have several facilities to fall back on. We touched previously on the issues that forced the railroad into a confrontation at the Battle of Bunker Hill, but to reiterate, it was because they send all their liberated synths to Bunker Hill before either smuggling them out of the Commonwealth or wiping their memories. This made Bunker Hill a location they couldn't afford to give up, forcing them into an open fight with the Brotherhood of Steel and the Institute. The game portrays this as an ambush if you warn the railroad, but this is disingenuous as the entire fight happens on favourable terms for the railroad's enemies. They are pinned in, unable to flee, and have multiple synths that are unable to escape the combat. Even if it is a victory for the railroad, their most important location and the bottleneck of their entire organisation is now compromised. The railroad's dead drop system on the surface is quite good, with multiple drop locations marked by chalk symbols that are well known to their members. However, the symbols that the railroad use have been compromised as the Institute took control of the switchboard, and the holotapes themselves are unencrypted, meaning that if one was captured, it would compromise the identity of the individual who made it. Logistics is something that's not really touched on during the railroad's questline. We occasionally find a railroad cache around the Commonwealth. Tinker Tom tells us that he makes weapons, and Pam sends a sole survivor to loot hidden pre-war DIA caches located around Boston. However, this is it. The occasional looting run and one person crafting weapons wouldn't be enough to arm and equip an entire organisation, and Tinker Tom would constantly be constrained by money and material shortages, both of which would be difficult to supply without compromising the HQ's location. Lack of popular appeal covers how the railroad does and doesn't make itself appealing to the average person in the Commonwealth. The railroad does very little to make the citizens of the Commonwealth sympathetic to them or their operations. They put a few holotapes in somewhat public areas, but this is it. When combined with the fact that they focus all their operations on liberating synths, which many Commonwealth citizens are afraid of, it creates an uneasy atmosphere around the group, with many being just as suspicious of them as the Institute. It doesn't help that Desdemona views most Commonwealth citizens as bigots, which reduces the group's desire to help ordinary people from the Institute's predatory actions. This lack of presence makes the group seem just as secretive as the Institute. Secrecy is required on a fundamental level in order to protect themselves and their operations, but they act less like a resistance and more like a cult, with a suspicion of all outsiders as they don't follow their beliefs. This quasi-cult behaviour is often the reason why their actions seem so counterproductive, as they do things with as much fear of regular people as they do of the Institute. The one rule I had when going into this project is that my reimagined railroad must still be recognisable as the railroad. They must be clandestine and secretive, with a focus on opposing the Institute and freeing third-generation synths, not some huge territory-taking army with a massive military presence. The changes I will make to the railroad have been inspired by the French, Belgium and Dutch resistance movements during World War II. I'm particularly focusing on a group called the Dutch Paris Line, which spanned all three countries, had hundreds of members who didn't all know each other, and was able to save around 3,000 people from the Nazis, including Jews, Allied airmen, Labour draftees and spies. While we think of the French, Belgium and Dutch resistances as national organisations, they were actually split into dozens of groups with hundreds of cells and thousands of members. These members would often not know all their fellow resistors, have difficulties with supplies and manpower, and did engage in criminal activity such as document fraud and contraband smuggling. Allied supply drops were a huge boon when they could get them, but this was not always reliable due to communication issues and German interference. Despite this, they were able to pull off some impressive acts of resistance, such as the Belgian Military Organisation of Resistance, known as OMBR, which killed 600 German soldiers in one night by blowing up a train bridge in the Ardennes. These resistance groups had dozens of escape lines, which were routes that they could use to move escapees to neutral or allied countries. These lines would overlap, be discovered, be destroyed, and be re-established. This meant that if one line was compromised, or at risk of being compromised, they could use another. This system wasn't perfect, but it was far more insulated from failure compared to the railroad. In 2276, railroad leader Pinky Thompson is pressured to resign after a string of devastating failures left the organisation the weakest it had been since 2266. In this time of turmoil, elite railroad agent Desdemona wrote her book, Operational Strategies in the Commonwealth. This book acted as both a manifesto for the leadership election and a roadmap for reforming the railroad. She won the deeply divisive election and began to implement her reforms. Whilst some had assumed that her book would just be a piece of propaganda, she quickly proved them wrong by implementing extreme and in some cases unpopular changes. By 2282, the railroad had been fully reformed. Rather than a centralised intelligence gathering group, Desdemona's railroad had been remodeled into a decentralised insurgency with tiered hierarchy and information access. We will cover the changes in this order: facilities, personnel hierarchy and notable members, operations, and finally, unifying goals. The facilities that the railroad use can be split into three categories: HQ, safe houses, and campsites. The railroad's HQ is located in the Switchboard, an underground pre-war facility that had belonged to the United States Defense Intelligence Agency. It acts as a central command facility and communications hub, but no operations are conducted from it. The HQ is kept in the loop by receiving status and mission updates in order to provide oversight of its safe houses. The role of safe houses has been expanded and their capabilities increased. Previously, a safe house was a simple place where agents would rest and rearm, and synths would hide. This is no longer the case. Safe houses are now the centre of their own operational group and have almost complete flexibility in conduct, mission choice, and communication. The only time safe house autonomy is regulated is when the HQ sends out high priority mission orders, which under the new reforms are always to be carried out at the earliest possible time. Safe houses can communicate and coordinate with each other and are allowed to formulate their own strategies for disrupting Institute activities. This could range from the more benign theft and spying operations to the more violent assassinations and ambushes. Safe houses are a long-term base of operations and will have all the amenities of a long-term military dwelling, including an armory, barracks, kitchen, hygiene area and planning room. Safe houses get regular supply shipments to keep them operational, but we will go into more details of railroad logistics later. To protect the safe houses from discovery, railroad personnel will use the campsite system. This is where, during an operations planning phase, runners or tourists would scout and find a location where agents and heavies could muster immediately prior to the start of a mission. In this way, they can gradually filter out of a safe house to a campsite, conduct a mission, and gradually filter back into a safe house. This would reduce and mask the traffic of the organisation, so it appeared that the group had originated from the campsite rather than the safe house. All campsites are immediately abandoned after an operation has concluded, and the location is barred from use for 1 year from the most recent Institute sighting. Campsites are typically little more than a small tent gathering or an abandoned building. They are only meant for very short-term habitation, with the longest recorded use of a campsite being 8 days. The structure of the railroad now looks like this, providing significant levels of protection and decentralization. In the event that a safe house is believed to be compromised, HQ can send a message to the other safe houses ordering them to suspend the affected safe house, isolating them from the rest of the network. If this infiltration is genuine, it prevents the infiltrator from gathering information on the larger organisation, and if the infiltration is not genuine, then it allows the safe house to continue its work parallel to the rest of the organisation, waiting for the all clear signal and then being reintegrated. The railroad's personnel hierarchy allows for the quick recognition of authority in a given situation. The hierarchy is flexible and adaptive, with members being allowed to ascend or descend the roles depending on merit, skill, and personal desire. Railroad personnel are divided into 3 categories: non-affiliated, safe house affiliated, and HQ affiliated. The non-affiliated category contains only a single rank, the tourist, which is the lowest ranking member. A tourist can be any person who has been recruited for a short-term temporary mission. Tourists are not members of the railroad and will often complete a single mission before being removed from service. Tourists will either be recruited directly by agents or indirectly by fake bounty missions located on the bounty boards in major settlements. More idealistic tourists may be told who they are working for, while those less inclined to the railroad's goals will be kept unaware. Missions conducted by tourists are almost always non-offensive in nature due to their lack of training and unknown loyalty. They typically include light reconnaissance of potential campsite locations, scavenging for rare items that the railroad needs, or as mercenaries to clear locations of pests like mole rats or feral ghouls. Due to their ad hoc recruitment and wide range of backgrounds, tourists could be equipped with any manner of weapons and armour, from pipe pistols all the way up to plasma sniper rifles. They receive no training or material support from the railroad, and vary in effectiveness. You might expect such an arrangement to be predatory in nature. However, Desdemona has implemented a safeguard for tourists known as the 60% rule. If there is a less than 60% chance that a poorly armed, poorly trained tourist could survive the mission, it is forbidden from being assigned to any and all tourists. In this regard, the railroad helps protect Commonwealth citizens from being sent into needless slaughter. Tourists who make a good impression on railroad personnel will be invited to join the organisation and will be assigned to the safe house of the agent who recruits them. It should be noted that a thorough screening and assessment of loyalty and ideals will take place prior to the tourist being invited to join. Now we move on to the safe house affiliated category, which contains 4 ranks. The first of the safe house affiliated ranks is the runner. Runners fill a variety of roles in the railroad, including messengers, logistics support staff, and scouts. Being a runner is the first job of around 70% of new recruits. It allows them to see a variety of operations without exposing them to too much information or personal risk. This keeps the organisation safe in the event that an institute spy is recruited, but it also keeps a genuine recruit safe whilst they are given the necessary training to prepare them for further duties or potential promotion. Should violence become unavoidable, runners should wield a pistol, sawn-off shotgun or small blade, as these weapons are easy to carry and conceal. It is also a good idea for runners to carry accelerant and a lighter in order to destroy any information should they be cornered by Institute forces. Ascending the ranks introduces us to the backbone of railroad personnel, the agent. Agents are the first true field rank and may be tasked with all manner of missions, such as spying on suspicious persons, assassinating enemy personnel, gathering information, or escorting free synths to safety. To become an agent, one must demonstrate significant aptitude in stealth, marksmanship, and espionage. They are the most widely available forces that the railroad has, and thus have the most service opportunity. They are also given significant training in de-escalation, so that if they are confronted by frightened civilians or a free synth who is being threatened by a Commonwealth citizen, they can try to peacefully resolve the situation. Agents have access to a much wider selection of weapons and equipment than runners, and whilst agents are often encouraged to arm themselves in a manner they find most appropriate to the task at hand, Desdemona has some wise words for us in her book Operational Strategies. The passage reads, "Agents should ideally be armed with a suppressed 10mm pistol as their primary weapon, a suppressed semi-automatic rifle or sniper rifle, 1,000 caps for bribery or emergency purposes, 20 bobby pins for lock picking, and enough medical supplies for their mission plus 2 additional days in case of emergencies. Agents should not dress in a manner that will draw attention to themselves unless specifically required for mission purposes. Flamboyant pre-war party clothes and clean pressed suits should particularly be avoided." Moving up the ranks further, we come to the distinguished heavy. Heavies are hand-picked from the most successful agents, but may also be picked from agents who struggle with traditional elements of espionage but excel in combat. They are typically deployed as heavily armed enforcers who will bring extreme violence against their adversaries. Safe house heavies will be tasked with guarding safe houses or high-risk locations and escapees, ambushing Institute patrols, and attacking or intimidating anti-synth bigots. They will typically be armed with 44 caliber revolvers, submachine guns, combat rifles or shotguns, frag grenades or Molotov cocktails, and knuckle dusters or police batons for when a non-lethal approach is required. They will be dressed in heavy metal or combat armor, which allows them to shrug off low caliber gunfire and offers significant protection against laser weaponry, which is often employed by the Institute. The final Safehouse affiliated rank is the Safehouse Director. Safehouse Directors are very few in number, with there only being as many directors as there are safehouses. They are in charge of local operations, coordination with neighbouring safehouses, intelligence analysis, supply requisitions, and advising HQ on strategic developments. In this final matter, Safe House directors act as a sort of inner counsel for the railroad's leader. They do not take part in missions and thus are not required to be armed at all times. It's for this reason that most directors will carry around just a small pistol or revolver, which can be used for self-defense should the safe house be attacked. Directors are chosen for their role by HQ from among the members of that respected safe house. The choice being made by HQ keeps the safe house in line with overall railroad goals, whilst the selection of a local member is done to improve safe house cohesion and efficiency, as a local member will be more familiar with the inner workings of their particular safe house. The final group of railroad personnel are the HQ affiliated ranks. It should be noted that all of these personnel are hand-picked from the most esteemed and accomplished of the safe house staff. The first rank of the HQ affiliated staff is the HQ agent. These agents are recruited from safe house agents and are given additional training. Once sufficiently trained, they are redeployed. HQ agents are armed with the very best espionage equipment that the railroad has to offer. These include discreet but protective ballistic weave modified clothes, prototype stealth buoys which are even more potent than their pre-war counterparts, and the exceedingly rare and powerful pre-war covert pistol. Along with their additional equipment, they also have additional privileges. HQ agents are given almost complete discretion in mission choice and approach, and are encouraged to pursue the Institute in their own capacity. This level of operational autonomy has led to some railroad members referring to HQ agents as free agents. Some HQ agents in the railroad have earned a truly legendary status. For example, HQ Agent Deacon has earned such a notorious status for infiltration, disguise and deception that some members, including Desdemona, believe that he is actually the agent John Dee, who was the only survivor of Agamemnon's destroyed railroad. The next rank of the HQ affiliated personnel represents the very best of what a railroad member can become. They are the elite of the elite, the distinguished and feared HQ Heavy. HQ Heavies are recruited from either Safe House Heavies or HQ Agents. Similar to HQ Agents, they are given additional training upon being recruited, and similar to their Safe House counterparts, they are deployed as heavily armed enforcers. What differs, however, is the scope and danger of their duties. In addition to the duties of a Safe House Heavy, they will also be deployed to investigate Corsa sightings, attacks on safe houses and failed missions. To make these assignments possible, the railroad outfits its heavies with the very best. This includes dressing them in the custom-made railroad heavy jacket, which can protect the wearer from anything except 50 caliber bullets and high-end explosive munitions. HQ heavies have access to a truly dizzying array of weapons, including plasma, assault and Gauss rifles, combat shotguns and plasma grenades. The final rank in the HQ affiliated staff, and the leader of the entire railroad organization, is simply referred to as the leader. Although this simplistic title can trace its origin back to the pre-Desdemona Railroad, it has stuck. Desdemona is the current leader of the railroad and is the only one to have held this title since her reforms took place. The leader decides upon the organization's overall goals when they are elected to power, and is in charge of making organization-wide decisions based upon the intelligence gathered by the safe houses. Over the course of analysing the railroad's hierarchy, we have met some of its notable members, including Desdemona and Deacon. Let's now uncover some of its other esteemed members. Dr. Carrington came second place in the election that saw Desdemona rise to leadership. She recognised his potential and made him her second in command. This made him both her primary advisor and director of a safe house located at Taffington Boathouse, codenamed the Doctors Club. Old Man Stockton was a successful businessman on Bunker Hill prior to being recruited into the railroad. He quickly advanced to the rank of agent and then again to director of the Bunker Hill Safe House. His booming caravan business allowed him to strengthen the railroad's logistics by running caravans that would sell legitimate goods to Commonwealth citizens and carry requested supplies to drop-off points for safe house runners to recover. He has used his caravans to smuggle synths between safe houses, helping to cover the railroad's tracks. His legitimate business ventures also helped keep the railroad financed, as running a resistance movement is a cash-intensive endeavour. Safehouse director for Ticonderoga, High-Rise made his living as a scavenger in downtown Boston before being recruited. He turned his crash pad into a safe house, and given that it is uniquely located, he was asked by Desdemona directly to command railroad operations in that area, as Boston remains dangerous. He frequently steps outside the bounds of his duties and will take missions such as escorting escaped synths directly, despite being cautioned against this by Desdemona and Dr. Carrington. Dan is an agent based out of Bunker Hill, although he is rarely ever there. He often disguises himself as a caravan guard in order to help move synths around the Commonwealth, and will typically spend his time spying on other travelling merchants, such as Trashcan Carla and Cricket, due to their cooperation with the Institute. He fiercely values his work with Old Man Stockton, and has refused promotion to Heavy or HQ agent several times. Glory, aka the Angel of Death, is by far the most infamous and distinguished HQ Heavy, standing herself apart from other HQ Heavies by her choice of armour and weapons. She chooses to wear a set of T-51 power armour emblazoned with the railroad's emblem. She also wields an assault rifle for more menial engagement, but when the situation heats up and it's time to party, as she calls it, she will throw all subtlety to the wind and wield a custom-made tri-barreled minigun which fires explosive rounds. She's often criticised for her dangerously indiscreet methods, but even her biggest critic, Dr. Carrington, can't argue that she deals serious damage to Institute operations. She earned her legendary reputation when she killed her first courser in hand-to-hand combat. Since then, she has had every part of her arsenal customised and fine-tweaked for killing coursers. Thomas Weatherby, aka Tinker Tom, occupies a unique position in the railroad hierarchy. He is technically a runner due to his focus on support logistics, however, he almost never leaves HQ. Instead, he spends all his time manufacturing unique equipment for the HQ agents and heavies. He is also the only person smart enough to decode a courser chip, making him an extremely valuable member. He was recruited by the railroad after being the only survivor of an Institute attack on his home in 2279. His trauma from this incident and his growing dependency on chems has left him eccentric and paranoid. However, his general confinement to HQ means that he can be reliably looked after. Dr. Amari is the director of The Basement, a safe house located in the Memory Den in Goodneighbor. Dr. Amari is the railroad's foremost expert on memory wiping synths, and she is in charge of training any safe house doctors who wish to learn this procedure. The Basement is a relatively small safe house with little in the way of defences or staff in order to help maintain a low profile in a major urban centre. Hancock is the ghoul mayor of Goodneighbor and a tourist. His freedom-loving attitude, combined with his willingness to turn a blind eye to railroad activity in Goodneighbor, has been a huge asset to the organisation. He turned down a recruitment offer in 2285, stating that Goodneighbor needs its mayor. However, it's been alleged by local agents that his personal bodyguard, Fahrenheit, has assisted the railroad on a few occasions. However, this information is sparse, and both Desdemona and Fahrenheit deny this. Caretaker is an accomplished safehouse director who runs the Mercer Safehouse out of Outpost Zamonja, which is disguised as a small farmstead and trading post. Caretaker has survived the destruction of many safehouses and has had to rebuild his group many times, making him something of an expert in recruitment and training. Boxer is an agent for the Fisherman's Safehouse located at Kingsport Lighthouse. Boxer hasn't been seen in the Commonwealth for a few years, but has recently been assigned to the independent synth refuge of Arcadia as a diplomat after the railroad learned of its existence. She provides updates on Arcadia to HQ and has tried to deepen ties between the two groups. Victoria Watts is an agent for the Constitution Safehouse located on Spectacle Island. Like Boxer, Victoria Watts has not been back to the Commonwealth in several years and runs a synth hideaway in Rivet City with liberated courser A3-21, now known as Harkness. Watts is an accomplished agent who has been able to operate independently for almost a decade. Now that we have brought its most notable members into perspective, let's break down the railroad's primary operations. This will include safe house locations, escape lines, and notable operations. Safe houses are located across the Commonwealth and shall be covered from north to south. Outpost Zamonja, also known as Mercer, is disguised as a small farm and trading outpost for caravans coming into and out of the Commonwealth, and allows the railroad to apply pressure in the northern region. Kingsport Lighthouse, previously mentioned as the Fisherman's Safe House, is disguised as a settlement of fishers and scavengers and maintains an operational area in the northeast of the Commonwealth. Taffington Boathouse, mentioned as the Doctors Club, maintains its cover as a medical facility for anyone who can pay its expenses. It is the main centre for providing medical training to railroad doctors, agents and heavies. Its operational area is the Central Commonwealth region. Sunshine Tidings Co-op, known as The Farm, is disguised as a huge farming community with many non-railroad members within. The farm has an operational area in the northwestern and western Commonwealth region. Bunker Hill is a huge trading outpost with the railroad safe house located under the settlement. Its existence allows the railroad to bring in a constant flow of money and keep tabs on Institute-aligned traders. It is also the place where recently escaped synths are instructed to go by the mysterious tourist known only to a few railroad members as Patriot. Ticonderoga, located in the ruins of a skyscraper, is disguised as a small but professional scavenging operation and is the key safe house for easing pressure on Bunker Hill and operating inside of the Boston ruins. Hangman's Alley / Diamond City are known together as High Living. Home Plate was recently purchased by the railroad and a tunnel has been dug from the property to the nearby Hangman's Alley. Both locations make up the safe house, with Home Plate being disguised as a mechanic and repair shop and Hangman's Alley being disguised as a base for a small but effective band of mercenaries. Spectacle Island, called Constitution, is the most isolated of the safe houses and is critical to projecting railroad power in the South Boston coastal region. Similar to Kingsport Lighthouse, it disguises itself as a fishing and scavenging community. Its location allows the railroad to project power over the southeastern coastal region. Egret Torres Marina is known as the Lodge and is the most southernly located safe house. It disguises itself as a group of professional hunters who sell their skills as pest exterminators, typically being paid by nearby farms or wealthy clients to hunt down dangerous creatures like deathclaws or mirelurks. It is in a prime location to help project railroad power through the riverways and southern marshes. The railroad has 4 escape lines which it uses to help liberated synths escape from the Commonwealth. These escape lines are codenamed Tyranny, Alliance, Regulation and Mutiny. The Tyranny line leads to the Capital Wasteland via Spectacle Island. Alliance takes synths to Arcadia via Kingsport Lighthouse. Regulation takes synths north into Vermont and Canada, while the Mutiny line takes synths east into New York through Vermont as well. The railroad has several notable operations which are either ongoing or completed. The most important ongoing operations is the monitoring of the mass fusion building for more escaped synths. When synths are spotted leaving mass fusion, they are intercepted by agents from either Ticonderoga or Bunker Hill and escorted to those places respectively. Once there, they are funneled to other safe houses and given information about life on the surface, and given the option of having their memories wiped. Another important ongoing operation is the gathering of information on Institute forces and aligned individuals. This information allows the railroad to plan attacks against them in order to degrade their operations. Information is gathered in a variety of ways, but it is mostly by agents operating in the field. A notable past operation is the reprisal attack on University Point in 2285. University Point had been a major trade hub for several years when it was attacked by the Institute, seeking data that had been discovered by the inhabitants who were scavenging the semi-submerged university offices. The majority of the settlement's civilians were slaughtered. The railroad, in response, launched a heavy-handed retaliatory strike against the Institute forces now occupying the ruins. They killed over 100 synths and forced Kellogg, the much despised Institute enforcer, to flee the scene with the data. Today, University Point remains an abandoned ruin, staffed only by damaged synths, but the memory of how the Railroad, and not the Minutemen, came to punish the Institute for its actions remains a popular memory. However, the Railroad's most infamous operation, the one that cemented it in the popular mindset of Commonwealth civilians, was the assassination of Diamond City's Mayor McDonough in 2287. Articles in Piper Wright's newspaper, Public Occurrences, stated that the mayor was having secret meetings with an unknown couriers in the late hours of the night. These allegations got the attention of railroad agents in High Life and Ticonderoga, and they quickly made a plan. High Life agents monitored Diamond City and established a pattern of movement to this courier, and Ticonderoga agents intercepted and killed him. Piper had been correct, as the courier was a synth working for the SRB. A message the courier was carrying was decrypted, and it revealed that Mayor McDonough was a synth double. A railroad agent dispatched this information to Desdemona, along with a recommendation to assassinate him. Desdemona immediately authorized this action. HQ agent Harold Michaels, codenamed Rabbit, was dispatched and carried out the assassination in public by shooting the mayor at point-blank range while he was speaking at a public gathering. Security arrested Rabbit immediately, but the revelation that the mayor was a synth and his killer was a railroad agent led a mob to gather outside the city jail, demanding that Rabbit be released. An emergency council was formed and failed to appease the crowd with its offer of a reduced sentence. Eventually, security guards, worried about a riot breaking out, released Rabbit from jail. Rabbit was hailed as a hero of Diamond City, and he departed with cheers and gifts from the locals. Now we shall move on to the final part of Desdemona's railroad, its unifying goals. The unifying goals provide the railroad with a long-term objective and provide a framework for keeping the safe houses working together. The railroad has 3 unifying goals. The first is to liberate all Gen 3 synths and destroy the Institute. They plan to do this by fomenting a synth rebellion within the Institute itself. The second is to protect third-generation synths from bigotry and persecution by unfriendly Commonwealth citizens. This will be done by assigning heavies to protect synths and agents to spy on anti-synth bigots. The third is to form a provisional government based on the ideals of tolerance, emancipation, and democratic values. This provisional government would first be run by railroad members, with the leader acting as a de facto president, and the Safe House directors acting as local representatives. But after the situation has stabilised, elections from among the wider Commonwealth citizenry would take place, and railroad members would be replaced by representatives of major settlements. Together, these goals help with the destruction of the Institute and the creating of a stable democratic system that will help to rebuild the Commonwealth and heal the decades of fear that the Institute has inflicted. This section deals with how the Railroad's main questline will play out and how the player can join the Railroad. The backdrop to the Railroad's disorganisation at the beginning of the game will be this. In 2288, a prolonged mission by the SRB has resulted in 3 safe houses being infiltrated, and thus HQ has had to suspend all safe houses to prevent further infiltration. The sole survivor would join a safe house by one of the following random encounters: finding a dead railroad agent with an encrypted holotape and dropping it off at the marked dead drop location, finding an injured agent and helping them get back to their safe house, aiding a lost synth by helping it get to Bunker Hill, or by helping a group of railroad agents get synths out of the Commonwealth via an escape line. This allows the player a taste of the tourist phase, and then quickly promoting them to runner at a safe house in the region that the random encounter took place. The safe house director of that respective safe house would then task the sole survivor with sending a message to HQ stating that they've discovered mission critical information and wish to be reintegrated immediately. HQ heavies meet the sole survivor at a random location, a holotape is handed over, and the sole survivor leaves. The player will complete another 2 runner radiant missions and then will be promoted to agent by the safe house director and told to meet with a HQ agent at a concealed location. The agent will tell the sole survivor that the safe house's request for reintegration was successful despite the lack of precedence, and that you must work on re-establishing contact with the other safe houses in order to reintegrate them with HQ. This will begin a series of missions where the sole survivor must find a dead drop and complete its mission, one for each safe house in order to make them feel comfortable enough to establish contact with them directly. These missions can be failed, resulting in the sole survivor having to wait a few in-game days before being able to find another dead drop. Once all the safe houses have been reintegrated and the railroad is back on its feet, it will be revealed that the information the sole survivor's starting safe house found was that the infiltration of 3 safe houses had been a counterintelligence effort by the SRB and no infiltrations had taken place. From here, the main quest would proceed as normal, with Kellogg being killed, Virgil in the teleporter, and the synth uprising in the Institute. The sole survivor would be promoted to HQ agent after returning from the Institute for the first time, and promoted again to HQ heavy after destroying the Brotherhood of Steel. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It featured several mods to help me create the visuals that you've seen alongside my writing, and those mods will be listed in the description below. More videos regarding game writing will be posted in the future, so please subscribe to see more. Like and share as the algorithm absolutely loves that, and have a lovely day.